So in this lesson, we are going to try to track the same exact scene we tracked in Blender in After Effects. Now, After Effects is not a free software. It comes with Adobe's Creative Cloud subscription, or you could subscribe to just Adobe After Effects for $21 or so per month. Now, one thing to note is that even though tracking in After Effects is super fast and super easy, the add-on we are going to use to transfer all the tracking data from After Effects to Blender is not free. It's about $10. So just have that in mind as we go forward. So now we have a new project in After Effects. Now this is After Effects. It looks super complex, but don't worry, we're not going to use 1% of this software to do this track, so don't worry about that. I believe After Effects is the superior tracker because the tracking process is quite straightforward. Unlike Blender where we had to tweak a lot of things, the tracking process is just click a button and After Effects tracks it immediately. But the problem is now taking that information from After Effects to Blender. That is where we have to do a lot of steps, but I'm going to break it down in an easy way for you to follow. First thing we are going to do is to drop in our clip into After Effects. Now I've dropped in the background video. Now let's right click on it and click new comp from selection. Now we're going to create a new composition, and you can see down here bonus background video 36. That is our clip, and you can see the timeline here. So what we need to do is to track the video. So click on the clip. If you can't see tracker here, look, track camera. If you can't see this, go to window and then find tracker and make sure this is checked. Now that we have this, let's click on track camera. Then you would see here in the effect controls 3D camera tracker. Let's click on render track points. You don't actually need to click on it, but yeah, let's click on it. Advanced detailed analysis, and just let After Effects do its thing. Now, while we were doing our thing in Blender, in After Effects, all we need to do is to just sit back and wait and let After Effects do its magic. You can see up here, frame 49 of 433. Time remaining 2 minutes. So it's telling you, it's keeping you up to date. This is how much time we are going to take to track this footage, and this is how many frames we have tracked. So you're just going to let it go and track every single aspect of the footage. Now 2 minutes later, After Effects have finished analyzing our footage. So it took those 2 minutes to really peer through every single pixel in the footage to analyze it. Now it's solving camera. You can see it's showing solving camera on the screen. And so in just a couple seconds, we have our track. So these little points are tracking markers just like we had in Blender, but they are so tiny. Let's come here and increase the track point size. Just drag this up till it's big enough. So you can see we have our markers here. We have some markers on this ball. We have some markers on the building, just like in Blender. But the difference here is that we didn't need to change any settings. We didn't need to tweak stuff, move things around, solve camera motion again and again and again. No, it just did everything for us. Now, the next thing we need to do is to tell After Effects where our floor is. And the way you do that is to select a bunch of keyframes. Let's say, just drag, click and drag, and draw a circle on the floor. So you're basically drawing a circle to tell After Effects where the floor is. So for Blender, you're drawing a triangle, picking 3 points, but in After Effects, just draw a circle. And you can see it positioned this circle on the floor, just flush on the ground. Now when you have done that, right click on the circle, then click create solid and camera. Now you can see there is a pink plane on the floor. Now when we play the video, it's tracked. It's already tracked, like immediately. We didn't have to tweak stuff. We didn't have to go back and forth. We already have this plane tracked to the scene. Now the stressful part of using After Effects is having to copy all this data, all this tracking data from After Effects to Blender. It's a whole process, but we're going to go through it together. Now we're going to need an add-on to import all these details into Blender. Now this is not a free add-on, but it's also not an expensive add-on. Just search for AE to blend. Then you can see it on Blender Market, AE to blend. It's a simple add-on that helps you copy your camera track data from After Effects to Blender, and it's just $10. Now let's start with a new project in Blender. Let's delete this light. We don't need it. Let's delete the camera, and let's keep just the cube. Yeah. So we have to install the AE to blend add-on. So go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, come here, Install from Disk. Then go find the AE to blend zip file that you downloaded from Blender Market or Gumroad or wherever you found the file. So find a way to get AE to blend file, the add-on, and come here and click on Install from Disk. Then you should see down here, Modules Installed. Save Preferences, and when you have done that, you should have this tab here. You might have been wondering throughout the course that what is this tab for? It's basically AE to blend. So let's click here and drag so we can see the details. So this is the add-on right here. So to use the add-on, we are back in After Effects, click on your 3D camera tracker. You can see we no longer have just our background video here. We also have a layer of 3D camera tracker and a layer of track solid 1. So let's click on the 3D camera tracker, click on this drop down, click on transform, then make sure you select these two, position, shift click orientation. So you have two of them select, then just hit Ctrl C to copy. Then back into Blender, since you have it copied to your clipboard, just click on create camera. So Blender just automatically creates the camera. You can see the camera has animations on it, the camera has keyframes on it. So when we hit play, you see our camera moving. But then this is not all. We still have a lot to do to make sure we have transferred all the data from After Effects to Blender. Now we have replicated our camera motion. Now we need to take this plane and bring it to Blender. To do that, click on the drop down of the track solid, click on transform, then select the first 4 on this list, that is anchor point, shift click, position, scale, orientation. So this first 4, we selected the first 2 for camera tracker, and now we're selecting the first 4. Then hit Ctrl C. I like hitting Ctrl C twice because I have trust issues. Then come to Blender and click on create plane. Now, where is our plane? Yeah, our plane is way over here. We need to adjust that later. But then we have our plane here and we have our camera here. Now we need to go to output like we did before in Blender and switch this aspect ratio to 1080p by 1920. And then we should also check the frame rate. Yeah, this is super important. Frame rate here is set to 24 and make sure it's the same exact frame rate you have on your video. Again, we can easily just right click on the video and go to properties and details. You can see frame rate 24 FPS. Cool. So it matches. If it didn't match, if your frame rate there was 29.97, make sure you put the same thing here, 29.97. So make sure you pick the same frame rate in After Effects and in Blender. So now that we have that, we have our vertical video, but we have no background. So we are basically doing what Blender automatically did for us when we clicked on setup tracking scene. We are doing it step by step since the tracking wasn't done in Blender. So click on the camera, just the camera, then come here to your camera properties, come to background images, click this check mark, then add image. Then you are selecting movie clip since it's a video, then open, then go find your video. Yeah. Now we have our video here. Now, the only reason why this is showing perfectly is because all the videos that I give out for my challenges, I have already pre-exported them so they won't have any issues when you try to render them. If you record with your iPhone right now and then you import it just like I did, it might not look like this. Blender would interpret it as an horizontal video and then it will just be a rectangle here. You don't want that. If that is the case for you, just scroll down and click on fit, then change the rotation to 90 degrees, then change the scale to 1.778. Now that does not work for me. You can see that basically switched my scene 90 degrees. So you don't need this except your video was already switched 90 degrees. So let's undo that since we don't need that. And then let's increase our opacity to 1. Cool. Now if we press play, you can see we are not tracking to the scene yet, even though we have the data, but we don't have all the data we need yet. So we need to go back to After Effects and copy even more information. So in After Effects, let's go to our camera. Now double click on this camera and you get this information, the camera setting. What you want to do is to first change your film size to vertically, since we recorded a vertical video, then copy this focal length, whatever this is, 50.9304, copy it, and also note this film size, 64 mm, just note it, have it in mind. Now when we go back to Blender, make sure your camera is still selected, then scroll up, then paste the focal length we copied in Blender, so Ctrl V. Now we have the same focal length as After Effects. And also come down to camera, under the camera settings, size, which is the sensor size. Let's change this to 64. And remember the film size I told you to note in After Effects, this is where we're putting it. Now let's press play. Now you can see our plane is kind of tracked to the scene. It's still shaking somehow, but it's kind of tracked. So the reason why it's still shaking is because our camera is offset in Blender. So click on camera transform, you would see all these keyframes. So let's increase our end frame to 433 so it matches the video. Yeah, you can see if we scroll to the first one and zoom in, you can see our keyframes are starting from 0. Our keyframes should be starting from 1. So make sure everything is selected, hit A on your keyboard, then G, X, 1. GX1 will move the entire keyframes, all the keyframes to the right by 1 frame. So it's now starting from frame 1. Now when I hit play, you can see our plane. It is perfectly tracked to the scene. It's just glued on the floor. So we achieved the same exact effect we achieved with Blender with After Effects, but there's something left. You can see this plane is not on the flat plane. The plane is not even flat. It is rotated weirdly. I don't know why I should be paying $10 for an add-on and then this is what I get when I import it. So annoying. But then there's a way to fix it. Now to get our correct scale, click on the camera transform in the outliner, then control click the plane transform. Make sure the plane transform is highlighted in yellow, so make sure it's the last thing you click, then hit Ctrl P and object to parent it. So now when I move the plane transform, it should also move the camera. Everything moves. Now let's right click on the plane transform and select hierarchy. What this basically does is select everything underneath. If you didn't know before, if I just click plane transform, I'm selecting only the plane transform object. But if I right click and click select hierarchy, I'm selecting everything underneath. Next thing we need to do is come to our pivot point up here and set this to 3D cursor. Now when we scale or rotate, we are rotating around the center of our entire scene. So the 3D cursor, which is the world origin right now, is where we are scaling and rotating from. Now the first thing we want to do is to go to the top view using 7, making sure your plane transform is selected, the whole hierarchy is selected. Then you want to move everything so that our plane will be right under the cube. Yeah, you also want to bring it up. So select 3 and rotate it. So we are rotating everything including the camera. Rotate it and just try to eyeball it. This is what is annoying about this add-on. Try to eyeball it and just line it up with this line. So R to rotate and just line it up here. Go to the front view and make sure this side is also aligned. I think this is good. Yeah, I think this is good. I think it's quite flat now on both sides. Now you can see our Y line is in front. But what I want is, I want my Y line to follow the line on the road. So I can just hit RZ and rotate until this line is aligning with the road. Perfect. Now when I move, anything on the Y-axis is following the road. So we also have our tracks in here, but you can see a problem here. Remember how our cube is meant to be 2 meters by 2 meters? But you can see here our cube is super tiny. Super tiny. We do not want that. We want to make sure that our cube is as big as 2 meters. So to do that, we need to scale. And that is why we parented everything to the plane transform. And that is why we set the pivot point to the world origin. So that when we scale now, everything else will scale apart from the cube. So if I hit S in the camera view, if I hit S and I move it down, you can see our cube is getting bigger. Okay, one thing I need to do, let's click on the cube. Go into edit mode, GZ1. Yeah, to make sure the point is at the bottom of the cube. Now let's select our plane transform again, right click, select hierarchy again, and just scale to make sure it is as big as 2 meters. Is this 2 meters? This is how you adjust scale. 2 meters? Just try and eyeball it. Yeah, I think this should be a 2 meter cube here. Yeah, now we can scale our cube down now that we have adjusted the scale. You can click on the plane inside and scale it up. As you can see, we already have our track footage in Blender, tracked in After Effects and imported into Blender. So there are 2 ways you can do this. Whichever one works for you. They are both long processes, but in different ways. After Effects is short for tracking, but long for importing. And using Blender to track is just long and convoluted sometimes. But there are some scenes that will be hard for you to track in Blender, and that is where After Effects shines. A lot of scenes that might be just super complex, or there are not a lot of tracking markers on the floor, and Blender just starts tweaking. After Effects will shine in situations like that. So it's good to have these 2 softwares under your belt, so in any situation you know you're good. There are a lot of other tracking softwares, super complex ones, Hollywood standard ones, but they are expensive. They are proper expensive. I think there's one that is like $600 or $800 to get the rights to the software, but Blender is free and After Effects is $21 per month. So yeah, there you have it.